Hi, I'm Andrew Connell, and I'm a Microsoft MVP in the area of Microsoft 365 development. And I have a lot of experience with SharePoint development, including all of the different development models that we've had, Microsoft Graph development, Microsoft Teams development, and developing add-ins for Microsoft Office, as well as working with Microsoft Identity, including Azure AD. Role-based access control, or RBAC, is a popular mechanism to enforce authorization in applications. The administrator assigns roles to different users and groups to control who can access what content and functionality. Using RBAC with application roles and role claims, developers can securely enforce authorization in their apps with little effort on their part. Another approach is to use Azure AD groups and group claims. In this module, you're going to learn how to use both Azure AD groups and application roles to provide fine-grained access control to an application. In this section, you're going to learn how Microsoft Identity enables developers and administrators to grant and secure access to custom apps. Microsoft Identity enables developers to build custom applications and secure them in various ways. You can configure your custom apps to support users signing in using their personal or consumer Microsoft accounts or with their work and school account. Now, users with consumer Microsoft accounts won't be able to have assigned roles, nor will they be able to be members of groups. An app can then grant users the ability to do specific tasks depending on who they are, what groups they belong to, or what roles they've been granted within the application. Users are managed from Azure AD, the Azure AD Admin Center, including users within your organization and those added as guests in B2B scenarios. In addition to users, administrators and other people with the appropriate access can use the Azure AD Admin Center to create and manage security groups that contain collections of users, groups, and roles specific to your custom app. Custom apps that are configured with Microsoft Identity to support users signing in receive information about the user. This includes profile information such as their name and email address, but can also be the groups they belong to or the app roles that they've been assigned to. Your custom app can use this information in cases where the app has the necessary permissions. You can then enable the user to edit their details from within the app. When you register an app in Azure AD, you specify what types of accounts it will support. Each of the account types supported provides slightly different options. However, each of the options includes all the users in the organization where the app is registered. This means that any user with the All Users blade can sign in to your custom app. Microsoft Identity does support restricting an app to a certain set of users or security groups within your tenant. To restrict an application to a subset of users, first enable the setting on the app by selecting the Enterprise Applications from the All Applications menu item within the Azure AD Admin Center. Then, find the app, select the Properties navigation item, and enable the toggle for User Assignment is Required, and then save your changes. Once that property has been set, you can then use the Users and Groups blade within the app to manage the list of users and groups who can sign in and access your app. While administrators can control what users have access to an app using the User Assignment Required property, developers would need to account for specific users within the app. RBAC helps you manage resources, what areas of an app users have access to, and what they can do with those resources. Developers first create a role definition within the app's registration in the Azure AD Admin Center. The code within the app can check if a user has access to certain resources based on the roles assigned to the user. This pattern simplifies management as the developer can define the roles, while the administrators can grant users to these roles without requiring updates to the app's code. Now, in order for a web app to use Microsoft Identity to enable users to authenticate and obtain access tokens for use with services such as Microsoft Graph, you're going to have to register a new app in Azure AD. And this can be done using the Azure AD Admin Center at aad.portal.azure.com. When registering the app in Azure AD, ensure that the redirect URI of the app points to the callback URL of the web app. This URL must match the redirect URL provided by the app when the authentication process is started. The authorization code will then be sent to this endpoint, which means that you need to configure any authentication libraries and middleware to listen to the endpoint to receive the authorization code. The signout URL should also be specified so that the authentication libraries and middleware deletes any cache tokens or other data that is only needed for signed-in users. The web app will also need a client secret to sign in with Azure AD to exchange the authorization code for an access token. There are three things that you're going to need from Azure AD when you register the app. The tenant ID, which is the ID of your Azure AD directory. The client ID, which is a unique auto-generated ID of the app. It's also referred to as the app ID. And the client secret, which is the secret that you create during the app registrations. Now, while the secret key is used here for the purposes of simplicity, Microsoft recommends production apps use certificates with the OAuth 2 authorization code grant flow. Now, with the app register in Azure AD, the next step is to configure the web app. For ASP.NET Core web applications, most of these settings are saved in an app settings.json file. Open this file and set three values, the three values that you collected from registering the Azure AD app: the tenant ID, the client ID, and the secret. You may have to create a key for the secret. Next, you need to modify the web app startup process to configure the support for signing in with Azure AD and obtaining an ID token. Within the method configure services, in the startup.cs file, add the following code that configures the web app's middleware to support the v2 tokens from Microsoft Identity. Then, to display the signed-in user's details, you're going to use the OpenID Connect middleware that contains a default mapping of claims to the OpenID tokens to the user properties from ASP.NET Core. You can then use those properties within your web app, as the code here shows. Notice I'm listing out all of the types of claims and the values of those claims as well. In this demo, you're going to learn how to create a .NET Core web application that uses Microsoft Identity to log in and show the claims available to apply authorization checks within my app. But the first thing we need to do is we need to create an Azure AD application that our web app is going to be able to use. So I've already logged into the Azure AD Admin Center, which is located at aad.portal.azure.com, and I'll select the Azure AD, or select the Azure directory, and then I will choose App Registrations to create a new application. So my new application is going to be called the User Group Role. We're going to use this a couple times, and it's going to be single tenant. Now, what I want to do, we'll come back and we'll grab some configuration stuff in just a minute. But the first thing I'm going to want to do is I want to come over to the redirect URI, and I want to add in some redirect URIs for my application. So I'll choose the app platform is web, and the redirect URI when they log in is going to be HTTPS localhost 5001, and then sign in OIDC. That's using the sign in link for the OpenID Connect. And then we'll also have a sign out link as well. Now, as far as the implicit grant, we really only need ID tokens in this case. So I'll select ID tokens and then select configure. Now, once that's done, let's come back over to our application and let's grab the client ID and tenant ID. We're going to need these in our app. So I've already gone ahead and created the app. So let's go in and modify the configuration first. So the first one was the tenant ID. So I'll paste that in. And the second one is going to be the client ID. Well, there we go. So client ID and tenant ID. The other thing that we should grab is also the domain. So I'm going to come over to our project again, and I can get that from the dashboard, or I can get that from the homepage of Azure AD right here. I'll grab this as our domain, and I will paste that in to the domain. That is the unique ID of our Azure AD domain. Now, once I've gone through and set that up, let's go take a look at our application. So what I did is I used the .NET command line utility to just say .NET new MVC application, and then I said the auth was going to be a single org to just create a single organization. All right. Now, it spun up this application for me. So now let's take a look at what it gives us. So if I come over here and I look at the startup link, the startup link is going to give us is going to let us set up all the authentication configuration application stuff for our web app. So what I have here is I'm first setting it up for Azure AD authentication, and I'm connecting it to the Azure AD property from our app settings file that we just updated. Once that's done, I then added in this code right here for the OpenID Connect options to configure it to use the V2 endpoint for Microsoft Identity. Now, furthermore, that's going to configure all of my authentication stuff. The next thing I'm going to do is I went in and I created a view on the home page, my index view, and I modified it to say if the user is currently authenticated, then I'm going to enumerate through all the claims for the user and display those on the page. Then I can control that the user must be authenticated because on that home controller, I have an authorize attribute. So the entire controller requires users to be logged in. And then it will just on the index page is simply going to return an instance of the view. All right. So let's see this run. I'm going to call .NET build followed by .NET run. Let it finish building. There we go. So now it's going to go run. So this is now going to go through and spin up our application running on HTTPS 5001. So let's go ahead and grab that URL. And because I'm already logged in as one of my users, then it's not going to prompt me to log in. It is going to prompt me to consent to the web application though that we just created because I have to give it permissions to be able to read my profile. So I'll go ahead and say accept. And what I should get now is a list of all of the properties that are all the claims that are included in the token, the ID token that was received by OpenID Connect. So here you saw how to create a very simple ASP.NET web application and configure it to use Microsoft Identity to support users to sign in, and then to show the claims available to apply any authorization checks. In the next two demos, next two sections, you will learn how to do a lot of that same stuff, but how to do it with groups and also with app roles. In this unit, you'll learn what security groups are and how you can use them within your custom apps secured with Microsoft Identity. Azure AD, or Azure Active Directory, lets you use groups to manage access to your cloud-based apps, on-premise apps, and your resources. Your resources can be part of the Azure AD organization, such as permissions to manage objects through roles in Azure AD, or external to the organization, such as for software as a service apps, Azure services, SharePoint sites, and on-premises resources. Azure AD helps you give access to your organization's resources by providing access rights to a single user or to an entire Azure AD group. Using groups lets the resource owner assign a set of access permissions to all the members of the group, instead of having to provide rights one by one. The resource or directory owner can also give management rights for the member list to someone else, such as a department manager or the support department administrator, letting that person add and remove members as needed. The resource owner of a group can also enable users to find their own groups to join instead of explicitly assigning users to groups. Groups can be configured to automatically accept all user join requests or to require approval. Now let's look at using security groups in apps and APIs. Custom apps can request a user's group membership as a way to provide or restrict access to certain functionality within an app. And by default, the ID and the access tokens provided by Microsoft Identity only contain basic information about the current user. Security groups the user is a member of are not included in this token. To add them to the ID token, go to the security group in the app manifest that you can find in the app registration in the Azure AD portal and find the property group membership claims and add the security group value or all value. The code that you will write in ASP.NET Core will add the groups to the role claim instead of the group claim, so that there is one more thing that you need to change. Locate the optional claims property and update it to access token to include additional properties that will be returned as groups and roles, as you see there on the slide. Now with the app registered and configured in Azure AD, the next step is to update the app's configuration. Within the method configure services, locate the line that configures the OpenID Connect options and update the expression to match the code that you see here. Notice that we're changing the role claim type to be equal to groups. The addition of this line is added to specify the claim that represents groups when creating the claims principal in ASP.NET. Now in ASP.NET, you can secure a controller so that only authenticated users can access it by decorating it with the method authorize attribute. This attribute also supports securing the endpoint based on a specific security group. So after you configure the OpenID Connect middleware to use Microsoft Identity as the role claim, you can then specify the ID of a group to secure the controller. You can also use the group information in code. So you could use like the property user.isInRole and then pass in the GUID of the role ID or the group ID. And for example, the code that you see here is only going to show products, the product's navigation link if the user is in a specific group. In this demo, you're going to see how to create and configure an application registration to include group claims in a token and add some code that's going to authorize access to a controller that's going to use those claims. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to go in and find the application that we created in the last demo, and that's my user group role application. Now, inside this application, what I need to do is I need to go modify the manifest file. I need to modify the manifest to define this one setting here. See where it says group membership claims is set to null? What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this, and we're going to use security group. And what that'll do now is it'll include security groups in the manifest as well. In addition, I'm going to go look for the optional claims that you see there's nothing listed here, and I'm going to include an optional claim in the access token to include a claim name is going to be equal to groups, and the value or the additional properties is going to be emit as roles. All right, so let's now save our changes. Okay, so now that manifest has been updated, let's go back to our web application and let's check out some changes that I've made to this. So one of the things I changed here is right after we set that we want to use the v2 endpoint for Microsoft Identity, I'm also specifying that the role claim type is going to be equal to groups. And what that does is that is essentially going to map the groups claim to a role claim type for the OpenID Connect middleware. So I'm just going to map, instead of using the groups that it already had, I'm configuring it to say I want your roles to be using the claim that comes from the token to be groups. Now the next thing I did is I went into the home controller and I made some changes to the home controller here. Right? It has that authorized attribute, but if you'll notice, if you'll notice here that it allows everybody to access it, no matter what the claims that you have. What I want to do is I'm going to create a new controller that's going to demonstrate using group claims to authorize my users. But before I do that, I have to have a group. So let's go back over to Azure AD, and I'm going to come into Azure AD and I'm going to select groups, and I'm going to create a new group. And this will be of a type security group. The name of it's going to be called my product viewers. The group restriction is allows users to view products. The membership type is assigned, meaning I have to be able to assign people to this membership group. Dynamic user and device means that there's ways that you can set up like properties to automatically add them. We're not going to do those. I'm then going to say for the owners, I'm going to select Megan Bowen. That's the user that we're using as our sign-in user. And our members is also going to be Megan. And I didn't save my changes in the last one, so we have to do that. So I'll come back over here and select Megan Bowen. There we go. And we'll go ahead and create the group. Now, for our group that we just created, I need to get the object ID. This is the unique ID for my group. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that to the clipboard. Now, if I go back to my code, and if I take a look at the models, what you'll notice here is I have a new section here called categories. And then I also have products. And then I also have this file here that I created called sample data. This is using a NuGet library called Bogus to populate our application with some fake dummy data. If you look at the hands-on lab associated with this module, you can see exactly how this is set up. Okay, so now that I've done that, if I then look at a new controller we've created called product categories, what you'll notice here is I have an authorized roles set up. And I'm going to change the value of this role to be equal to the ID of the role that we just defined. So what you're going to see here is that now this is going to have our products controller is going to load, but only the people who are inside that group are going to have access to be able to see this, to run this controller, run this page. And so the index page, all it's going to do is it's simply going to go through and return a list of all the products. And so on my products view, it's just simply going to enumerate through all of those products and display them. So let's see if Megan can actually use this application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up and we're going to go log in, or we're going to run our app. So .NET build. Followed by .NET run. All right, so our application is now running. So let's go to port 5001. And let's go ahead and let's run this. So 5001. So there's our web app. And now notice all the different groups that this user has been added to. This is part of our change that we made to our app manifest to say include the groups. Also notice this DF339. That's the group that we said we wanted the user to, that we added the user to, and that we also added to our products page, our products controller. So if I go to products, I now see a list of all my products. Now let's back up for a second and let me go ahead and refresh the page. And what I want you to notice here is that if I come back over to Azure AD and let's remove the user from this group, groups, and we will select the user. So let's go groups. Product viewers, and let's find all the users in that group. So I will pick Megan and remove her, and we will also remove her from being an owner of the group as well. One owner, that's fine. So let's add in Alex. Here we go. Alex is a member now, or is an owner of it, and then I'll go ahead and remove Megan from that group. All right, now if I come back over to the page, let's see if we refresh the page here, we still have our ID token. So what we need to do is let's open up a new browser and go to HTTPS localhost 5001, and let's have Megan log in this time. And what we should see this time when she logs in, we no longer see that DF group listed. One of them's missing. And if she tries to navigate to the products group category or console, you can see that she's not given access to it because she's not in the role that she needs to be in. So in this exercise, you learn how to create and configure an application registration to include group claims in an ID token, and then control or use that as access control to your controller in your web API. in your web app project. In this unit, you'll learn how to add an app role to an Azure AD registered app, grant users and groups to that role, and use the app role within a custom app secured with Microsoft Identity. Role-based access control, RBAC, is a popular mechanism to enforce authorization to applications. The administrator can then assign roles to different users and groups to control who has access to what content and functionality. Using RBAC with application roles and role claims, developers can securely enforce authorization in their apps with little effort on their part. The application roles are defined in the Azure AD Admin Center in the app's registration manifest. When a user signs into the application, Azure AD emits role claims for each role that the user has been granted individually to the user and from the group, their group membership. Assignment of users and groups to roles can be done through the portal's UI or programmatically using Microsoft Graph. App roles can be managed from the Azure AD Admin Center. Select an application in the Azure AD Admin Center. Roles are defined in the app's manifest that's accessible from the manifest navigation item. You're going to locate the app roles setting in the manifest as you see here on the slide. Add application roles to the manifest by adding them to this app roles property. For example, the following JSON defines two new roles, product administrators and product viewers. Now note the display name property for each of these cannot contain any spaces. It must be all one word. After defining the app roles within the app's manifest, you can now add users to the role. From the Enterprise Application Blade in the Azure AD Admin Center, select the application and then select the users and groups navigation item. Select Add User on the Add Assignment blade and select the users or groups that you want to add the app role to. Then select the app role or app roles to add the user or groups. Now, using app roles as an authorization source is similar to using the group claims in the previous exercise, but there are two changes from using groups. First, you need to turn off the ASP.NET claim type mapping since we're not supporting legacy applications. And second of all, you're going to use the role claims in the token as role claim type. Now, with the app registered and configured in Azure AD Admin Center, the next step is to update your app's configuration. You're going to do this within the configure services method in the startup.cs file. You're going to update the configuration of the OpenID Connect options when configuring the service to the following. This code will first disable the default mapping of claims and configure OpenID Connect to map the roles to the app roles. Notice the difference in the line for the role claim type is set to roles. This is added to specify the claim that represents app roles when creating the claims principal in ASP.NET. Now in ASP.NET, you secure a controller so that only authenticated users can access it by decorating it within the method with the authorize attribute. And this attribute also supports securing the endpoint based on an app role. After configuring the OpenID Connect middleware to use Microsoft Identity as a role claim, you can specify the ID of a group to secure the controller. You can also use the authorize attribute to secure specific methods on the endpoint. For example, the following code is only going to allow product administrators the ability to create new products on the product controller. In this demo, you're going to learn how to create and configure an app registration to define app roles, to assign users and groups to those roles, and to authorize access to a controller using those assignments. So app roles is in an app registration. They're only defined by modifying an application manifest file. And so the roles are all going to have a unique identifier, a unique display name, and a value, and the value can then be inspected at runtime to make authorization decisions. So I'm going to come over and find our application that we created called user group role, and I'm going to go to the manifest. Now in the manifest, we have this section here for app roles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this app role and paste in a couple different roles here. So what you're going to see is I have two roles. I have one that is users can be in this role. This is my admin role. And then I have a viewer role. One's product administrators and one is product viewers. Within this, I also can specify some details about it as well. So you have like the origin, you have the value, etc. We'll be able to use those in different ways. Now, if you notice, I also have to have a unique ID for each one of these roles. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in two GUIDs that I'm going to create in a separate application. There we go. So there are two new roles that have been defined here. So I'll go ahead and save these changes. And now the next thing is I want to go grant some users access to this. So what I'm going to do is go back over here to my Azure AD Admin Center, go to my Enterprise Applications. I'm going to find my application that I just created, or that I have, which is my user group role. Here it is down here. And within this, I'm going to choose users and groups. So now that I'm inside users and groups, I'm going to go ahead and select Megan because she's one of the users in our application. And I'm going to go, let's see, I should find user. I'm going to go say add a user. And let's go find a user. We'll pick Adele. And then I want to choose a role for her. So here I have the role. I'm going to select add the role. And then it picks, I get to decide which one I want to grant her. So I'm going to give her the product administrator's role, or add her to the product administrator's role. Megan has default access, and we'll pick another user here. Let's pick Alex. And let's give Alex product viewer's role and assign that. So we have Megan, Adele, and Alex. So a couple different users that we're going to want to log in as. Okay, now the next thing is I need to now configure the middleware. So I need to go over to our project, and in my app settings, I've already defined everything about my application. This is from the same thing we've seen in the previous app. But one of the things I want you to notice is in the startup file here, we've made a change. First what I'm doing is I'm going to disable the default mapping of inbound claims. I want to have my own claims that I'm going to go through and I'm going to define. Notice that I have also set the token validation parameters, the role claim type I'm using, equal to roles. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to go through and I want to update the role check on my controller and on my view. So in my controller, I'm going to come over here to my products controller. And here for the authorized roles, I'm going to define that both product viewers and administrators can use the products controller. Here on the, when I want to create a new role, the user is going to have to be in the product administrator's role. If they want to be able to, and then when they submit it, they're still going to have to be in the product administrator's role. Now I've also set up in the view for this under products on the create page, I've set up a create view for collecting some information on a form that will be submitted. There's nothing special with this. It's just standard ASP.NET, the HTML. So now let's go ahead and let's run our application. So I'm going to open it up in the console and I'm going to say .NET build followed by .NET run. Okay, now we're going to need to log in as a couple different users. So we have Adele Vance, she's an administrator, and Alex is a product viewer. So you have to be an administrator to be able to create a new product. So let's first try and log in with Megan and do that. So I'm going to go to HTTPS localhost 5001. And let's go to our slash products endpoint. What you'll notice is that I'm getting denied access to this. Now, why am I being denied access to this? Well, for a couple different things, is that because if I go to my application, if I go back over here to my console app, and if I look at the products controller, you'll see that only product viewers and product administrators really should be able to get to the products controller. And furthermore, I'd actually modified, let's go ahead and close this, I'd even modified the UI so that I should have a navigation item if I'm a product viewer or an administrator. I should be able to at least see that inside of this navigation item inside of the top navigation for my project. So let's close this and let's instead open up a private window and let's log in using a different user. So let's go find one of our users. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Alex, his sign in is Alex W. So we'll use Alex W. He is, if you recall, Alex is a viewer. So Alex should be able to see the link, but he shouldn't be able to get access to that page. So let's log him in. Alex has never used the app, so we'll go ahead and accept the permission request. And then we will go in and specify the products page. Actually, we don't need to do this just yet. Notice right here, he is listed under product viewers. So now, if I go to slash products, you can see here that he can see the all the different product categories. But notice the new link is not there. If I log in as the other user, so let's open up another in private browsing and let's go log in as Adele. I'll grab Adele's password and accept. Now I can see that because Adele's in both the product viewers and administrators, she now sees the link. We can see that she's the administrator, so she can pick products and she gets the create new option to go create a brand new product. So this will be called like some brand new product, and I'll hit save. And if I scroll down, you'll see that some brand new product was actually added to the list. So in this exercise, you saw how to create and configure an application registration to define app roles, assign users, and get those roles to authorize access to a controller using those assignments. Thank you for watching this module. I hope you got a lot out of this, and I hope you learned something. This screencast is has an associated module to go along with it. And that module includes not only slides and demos, but it also includes a hands-on lab that will walk you through all of the steps that we showed here in the demonstration sections of this screencast. So make sure you check out the notes for this video to get access to the module where you'll find more information that you can use to get more about these resources. Thank you very much.